94.3 The Dude is very grateful to our men and women in uniform. We're proud to recognize local members of our military by turning the spotlight on them right now in our Soldier Salute.
Thank you to the Columbia Fireflies and our friends at Segra Communications for providing tickets for this week's featured soldier.
I'm your host, United States Marine Corps veteran Ethan Stitch Gardner, and on today's Soldier Salute, I have United States Marine Corps veteran Patrick Stanbrough. Pat, thanks so much for being here. You're my first guest on the Soldier Salute. I'm super excited to have you. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your story?
Oh, thank you, Ethan. I'm glad to be here. Originally, I'm from New York, Carmel, New York. No one's heard of it, but everyone's heard of Danbury, Connecticut, where I'm from originally. I stayed there until I graduated high school, and then I promptly left 10 days after I graduated high school for Marine Corps boot camp. I pretty much came out of the womb knowing I wanted to be in the military, so that was my next logical step, and I proceeded as such. Left 10 days after high school, went to Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, spent my time there. Then I was off to Camp Geiger for School of Infantry, and then I had the honor of being assigned to 1st Battalion, 6th Marines out of Camp Lejeune, Alpha Company. Spent my time there, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, Iraq in 2006 into 2007, and then Afghanistan in 2008 with the 24th MU Marine Expeditionary Unit. After that, I came back. They didn't really have much time for me to deploy again. They reassigned me to an MP unit for a few months, and I got out from there in 2009. After that, I made the supremely wise decision to move to Boston, Massachusetts, where I used my GI Bill benefits to go to college. Talk about internal conflict, being a guy from New York that moves to Boston. But, I love Tom Brady, so that's a good thing. Spent my time up in Boston. I spent a decade up there, the South Shore, Boston itself. Fell in love with it, and then kind of got tired of everything being cold and expensive, and decided to move myself down here to South Carolina, and here we are.
Pat, you mentioned that you were a Paris Island graduate. I myself am a Paris Island graduate as well. A lot of our listeners don't realize that Marines come from one of two places, Paris Island, South Carolina, or San Diego, California.
Yep, absolutely. I had the, we'll say, pleasure of being a Paris Island Marine. Anyone who's ever seen Full Metal Jacket is familiar with Paris Island. I can tell you that from whenever that time period was that was filmed in to now, it did not change much, or at least when I was there, it hadn't. Yeah, one of two recruit depots we have here in the United States is Paris Island, and then, of course, the West Coast, which is Recruit Depot, San Diego. Paris Island is sort of flat and hot, infested with sand fleas, which are majestic creatures. So Paris Island, you have 4 battalions. You have 1st Battalion, 2nd, 3rd, and of course 4th. 4th Battalion is where the female Marines are trained. The saying goes is that 1st Battalion makes drill Marines, 3rd Battalion makes killer Marines, and 2nd Battalion makes well-rounded Marines. So I had the pleasure of being a 3rd Battalion Marine circa 2005 when I went through training. All 3 of my drill instructors were infantry Marines who had seen, multiple deployments. So essentially, my 18-year-old self was dropped into a Paris Island barracks with 3 velociraptors, and in the end, it turned me into a stellar Marine, but certainly a learning experience, but it was an honor, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. The West Coast Marines, they have the hills, so they have hills.
Pat, every generation of Marine, we have famous battles that we've been a part of. For World War II, it was the Battle of Iwo Jima. For Vietnam, it was Khe Sanh. For Korea, it was the Chosin Reservoir. And my generation, one of the most famous battles is Ramadi. I understand that you are a veteran of Ramadi.
I was stationed with 1st Battalion, 6th Marines, Alpha Company. We were there in 2006. Ramadi was quite a place. At the time, most of the country had sort of been stabilized, or at least as stable as it could be back in 2006, comparatively. But Ramadi, they showed us a graph of the country, and it was, greens and yellows. In the middle of it, there was this one big red blob for enemy activity, IEDs and troops in contact and such. And they said, well, congratulations, that's where you're going. That's Ramadi. Ramadi is situated in Al Anbar province, part of the Sunni Triangle. But when we got there, there's a misconception because it was everyone hearing that major military operations were over in the country. But when we got to Ramadi, half the place was Indian country. It wasn't even taken over yet. So there was a lot of activity, and we actually ended up being part of the surge, which regretfully ended in us being extended in country. So instead of 7 months, we got to serve 9. But being part of the surge, we sort of pushed forward, set up a base, banged it out with the insurgents. Once we wore them down a little bit, we'd move forward more and set up another base. And through that methodology, we were able to push the city. And by the end of it, it was, I won't say it was a good place, but it was a much better place. I always tell people that don't understand how Ramadi was, or the Battle of Ramadi, that, and I'm not not exaggerating here. When I was there was no 20-minute period without gunfire and no 40-minute period without something blowing up somewhere in that city. So it's either a very good place for an infantryman to be or a bad place for anyone else to be.
Pat, Ramadi was a tough fight. That was a hard thing that you guys went out there and did. In those hard fights, certain things happen that no soldier, no Marine, no airman, no sailor is ready to deal with.
Well, as I said, Ramadi was a heavy combat zone. During our efforts to push the city, unfortunately, we did lose quite a few Marines. 2 from my platoon that I specifically want to mention. First being my squad leader, Sergeant Joshua Frazier, unfortunately was killed. What had happened is one day we pushed into arguably one of the worst neighborhoods in the city at the time. The Katana district in Ramadi was known to be a bad neighborhood. And essentially what we did was we went in the middle of the night and we set up. We just waited for them to come start a fight with us. They know you're there. We know that they know we're there. And that was kind of our methodology. Sergeant Frazier, unfortunately, passed away that day. He was killed by a sniper, but he was by far the finest Marine I've ever had the pleasure of serving with. My mentor. The only thing I can tell you is that it was a terrible loss and no one ever wants to go through that. The other would be Lance Corporal Michael Schwartz, who's my bunkmate, point man for another squad in my platoon. We were in a firefight. I was with my squad a block or 2 away. They were in contact and they had to run around a corner onto a more busy road, an avenue of approach. And his team leader was going to run around the corner and open the gate. And Schwartz said to him, "Hey, you got a wife and kids, man. I'm not letting you go around that corner." And Schwartz ran around the corner and, unfortunately, it was the last thing that he did. But he died keeping his brothers safe. And he gave his life for his brothers, and in the end, that's what being a Marine is about.
Pat, I'm sure as many veterans out there know, that the battlefield is not the only place that we lose our servicemen and women.
Yeah, unfortunately, I lost a lot of brothers in combat, but what no one prepares you for is that doesn't stop. And the worst part is it's an enemy that we can't shoot back at. When I got out, unfortunately, I've lost more friends than I care to count to suicide. It's an epidemic. It needs to end. And no one's ever prepared for it, and it just happens. It's really hard. People don't understand going from living a life that most people only see in video games and movies, and then when your service ends, suddenly you're just back in the real world, like nothing happens, like a bad dream, and you wake up. I work with a lot of veterans organizations that are into, charity and support and all that to keep the community supported. One of them that I really want to mention is 22 Kill. You can find them at 22kill.com. They have a lot of events, a lot of assets, a support system for veterans that are, approaching that edge or, looking over the ledge, into the darkness. And it's important that we have support for our brothers and sisters. I've lost too many friends. And one thing I'll say is, always make sure you check on your strong friends, because it's, unfortunately, from my experience, it's never the people that you think are the weak ones. It's always the strong ones. Always make sure you're checking on all your brothers and your sisters.
We are talking about that thing that nobody wants to talk about, veteran suicide. And I just want to take a moment to let everybody know listening that there is a hotline out there for you. And that phone number is 800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. 8255. Pat, earlier you were talking about a great organization, 22 Kill, and all the great things that they're doing for our veterans all over the country. Could you dive into that a little bit more and let our listeners know all the incredible things that 22 Kill is doing?
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure of working with 22 Kill for a long time, and everyone that I know supports them as an organization. Unfortunately, for those who don't know where the name stemmed from, 22 Kill, it's a heinous statistic. 22 veterans a day commit suicide, which is where the name 22 Kill came from. They're a really great organization with a lot of assets. You can become a sponsor, or you can work with them and you can be added to a list where if a veteran needs to talk to somebody, your number is on a roster that they can call. For me, I've been on, the fundraising side. They have a lot of fundraising things, motorcycle runs, events in general, and that's therapy in itself. The best therapy that I've found, or one of them, is being with your brothers and sisters, being around other vets. So just even the events that they have to support the cause, bring veterans together, and that in itself, really helps you meet a lot of really good people and get you into a network that provides support.
Pat, we've been talking about a lot of heavy stuff, a lot of good things that our listeners are going to take home. But something I've been thinking about this whole time, what's up with your man love crush on Tom Brady?
Well, he's a beautiful man. First of all, with those, he's weighted down with those 6 rings. Obviously, probably inhibits his movement a little bit, I'd imagine. Nope, being a New Yorker, I totally jumped ship and jumped on the Boston bandwagon. I'm sorry to say it. I know people are going to hate it, but I was a Jets fan prior to this. And going from the Jets to the Patriots, it's just kind of nice to see my team win every now and then.
Well, I'm a Steelers fan, and you mentioned the Jets. I mean, even Brett Favre couldn't save them. You must have a real good time being a winner now.
No, it is nice. And I mean, honestly, it's a great team. 6 rings is impressive. Number 7's on the way. But overall, I just love New England. I love Boston. I'm a big blonde guy, so everyone calls me Gronk. He's big and blonde. I'm big and blonde. See how that connection happened. If you ever get a chance, New England is beautiful. Boston is beautiful. It's my favorite city, and I'm pretty well traveled.
So besides like the clam chowder, what's good up there for food?
Well, the vanilla basic answer would be you need a lobster roll in your life. Me, I am from New York. I love myself some pizza, some Italian food and all that. You got to get to the North End for that. You got South Boston. That'll handle your Irish fare.
Your accent's starting to come out.
Hey, forget... Ked. No, but Boston is beautiful. I love it up there. There's a lot of history. That's kind of where this all started. I had the pleasure of living down the street from Plymouth Rock. I'd recommend it to anybody.
Thanks for joining us in our Soldier Salute, presented by Little Pig's Barbecue. Serving Columbia since 1963 with that bodacious buffet. And by Lexington Guns and Shooting Range, veteran owned and operated. And by Franklin Equipment. Rent, buy, rely. And Atkins Law Firm Workers' Comp Attorneys. Who you hire matters.